So I promised you a follow-up video for the Penobscot building, and I'm definitely going to get that done. But before that, I just have to say thank you for the overwhelmingly positive response to my first video. I was truly shocked by how many people were interested in Detroit history or architecture, or who went out of their way to just say positive things about my work. So whether you came from Reddit, from Facebook, YouTube, or you're just from my personal life, I just want to say thank you so much, because it genuinely makes me want to keep doing more of this, and it's a reminder of why I am doing this. So with this being my first follow-up video, I want to make sure I set the expectations right about what this is. This is going to be much more laid back than my other video, so no real fancy edits. Like, I'll do my best, of course. The main point of this is to provide information that I feel is important and interesting, but I didn't know how to incorporate it into the structure of my original video, to provide some corrections to some of the things I said or may have stated that were incorrect, and to also just clarify maybe some things about my thought process or my creative choices within the video. With all that being said, I definitely want to start with corrections because it's important to get things right, and I definitely got some things wrong, and I definitely want to go over that because I don't want to just leave that out in the open. So one of the first things that I noticed was that I got one of the dates wrong. When I showed this article from the Border City Star talking about Simon J. Murphy driving the first rivet, I said it took place on August 19th. Simon J. Murphy Jr. drove the first rivet on August 19th, 1927. Which wouldn't have been that bad because, you can mix up some days here and there, it happens. But it was quite literally impossible for it to happen on August 19th because the paper was from August 16th. I think I even had the correct date of the paper in the bottom left of August 16th. So I don't know how I knew the paper was from August 16th, but I said it was August 19th. I recorded the audio before I edited the visuals for the video, and probably when I noticed it, going over it again, double checking, I got it right. But I should have corrected it in my audio or put a note in there. So that's on me. So yeah, it was August 10th, not August 19th. Another thing I got wrong in the video was the estimated cost of the Penobscot building in 2021. The part with the original budget being $5 million in 1928 was perfectly correct. There are several papers from the time reporting on this estimated cost of $5 million, and that's not the issue. But when I tried to put it into 2021, I used a website and I trusted that the information that it was used was correct. But after using several different calculators, I found out that it was wildly off. So the correct number is not $20 million. It's around $79 or $80 million. Specifically, it's this number. And I feel bad because I feel like it exaggerated the value, because $80 million is still a value for a tall skyscraper in an urban city in America. For comparison, one of the largest and newest projects in downtown Detroit, the Hudson site, is estimated to cost anywhere between $900 million and $1 billion. So it's still amazing what they were able to get done with the budget that they had, but it wasn't nearly as, spectacular as I made it to be, and that was wrong, even if it was unintentional. So I wanted to correct that because I felt that was important. Another thing that I realized I got wrong after doing further research into this was the original construction timeline for the first Penobscot building. In the video, I said that it took about 1 year for construction to complete, which was wrong. It actually took around 2 years based off the information that I was able to find. After looking through some newspapers from the Detroit Free Press from around 1903, there are stories about groundbreaking taking place that spring, and with the building opening around spring of 1905, that's obviously 2 years, not 1 year. These corrections might seem small and minor to some people, and maybe they're right, but I also just believe it's important to correct things that I know are wrong. And I guess going forward, I just want to do a better job of including my sources, so not only can you look at it for yourself, but that I'm able to show that I am using reliable things to back up what I'm saying, and I'm not just making this up. because I do spend quite a lot of time researching for these projects, and I'm proud of the research that I do and the things that I'm able to find. So I want to make sure that I do a better job to keep you correctly informed and to better show off some of the work that I am doing behind the scenes. And speaking of research, there were so many interesting things that I found out about all these buildings that I couldn't include in the original video because I just didn't know how it could flow naturally from one part to the other. But my God, there are so many things that I could talk about here. I'll try to be brief, but it's just amazing. Starting with the final Penobscot building, during construction, there wasn't one, wasn't two, but 3 fires that broke out in the 1 year of construction. And the last fire happened almost when the building was getting ready to open, on the 40th floor or around there. And that was crazy. And so to me, hearing about a fire on a construction site is a big deal. Like, once again, referencing the Hudson site, if I heard there was a fire at the Hudson site, I think it would be a big deal around here. But what's funny is when I went to look for, information about the other 2 fires, I couldn't find it. So I guess for some reason, the other 2 fires, from what I was able to gather, they, people were just like, it's okay. But the 3rd fire, I guess the reporters were showing up that day. And if they hadn't shown up, I don't know if I would ever find out that any fires took place during construction. But yeah, there were at least 3, and who knows, maybe there was even a 4th. And it wasn't just the 3rd Penobscot building that had issues during construction. The original Penobscot had several complications that it had to overcome. One of the most notable being that the smokestack fell all the way from the top, so 14 stories up, down to the ground below, narrowly avoiding people and surrounding buildings. Because if you look at the original Penobscot, it's in a tight block. To this day, there are still several buildings closely knit together. And obviously this massive, part of the building, the smokestack, could have done a lot of damage and it could have harmed someone. But luckily it didn't. And it's a bit amazing because it just happened to take place on a day, according to the reports from the Detroit Free Press, it took place on a day when construction was slowing down and it just missed, the other building. But it's kind of crazy because the smokestack was 65 feet tall or long, depending on how you had it, and 6 feet in diameter and made of wrought iron. So this thing was huge and heavy, and it luckily didn't cause major damage. Another notable thing that happened during construction of the original Penobscot was a strike that took place in October of 1903. And I don't know how much this impacted the actual progress of constructing the original Penobscot, but what it led to was a lot of tension between union workers and non-union workers. Things got so bad that non-union workers who continued to work on the Penobscot had to get police escorts home. And one person even got assaulted even after a police escort, because the police escort would only take you to the city limits, and after that, you were on your own. So several strikers continued to follow this person home and assaulted them there. I'm not certain if this is the only case of this happening during the construction of the original Penobscot, but it's the one that I was able to find. And I do know that police escorts continued after this, and that the person who committed this, or the alleged perpetrator, was arrested. But I can't imagine how you would feel going into work knowing that someone you were working with was beaten up simply for doing their job, and that something that was tried to help you wasn't enough, and that's all you had. That would be a wild event if it happened today, and I'm sure it wasn't much comforting back then either. Focusing on the final Penobscot again, one of the things that I didn't fully underscore or wasn't able to emphasize was the importance of the radio beacon on top of the Penobscot building. It's just a red aviation light that you would find on most tall buildings nowadays. But at the time, this was considered something new and something unseen. So it really took on a life of its own in both Detroit and in neighboring Windsor. The Border City Star, which is now the Windsor Star, had several different short stories featuring mentions or acknowledgments about the red beacon of the Penobscot building. One of them was about a short story written from the perspective of Christopher Columbus looking for land. And I don't know the joke, and maybe you'll get it. I don't. But at one point in it, it's like a captain's log. He says, "That's the beacon on the Penobscot building, or I'm a Bulgarian." And maybe that, like, that slapped in 1928. But, like, I'm just sitting here and I'm just like, I don't get it. So it's funny to imagine how this part of the building became so iconic that, nowadays it would be like if someone made a meme about it. But maybe Christopher Columbus Bulgarian jokes were the meme at the time. But I don't know. If you know, maybe you can give me the answer. But I am out of touch with that one for sure. And the final thing that I wanted to point out during this section was how another person, or one of the tenants specifically, actually threatened to sue the Penobscot building's owners in the 1970s because there was rumored to be a name change to the building. I don't know the full details of what the tenant was asking or was going to, specifically sue, but one of the things that was emphasized was that this tenant moved in to the Penobscot building because of the Penobscot name. And I just find that somewhat, both hilarious and remarkable, because it makes me think of that 1902 article where Simon J. Murphy Sr. is explaining why he chose the name he did. And it's insane that, Penobscot, which, before these buildings even existed, had no real connection to Michigan or Metro Detroit. And it got to the point that, several generations later, someone would threaten to, sue to keep that name on a building. Now, would it have been a successful lawsuit? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But, it just goes to show how the Penobscot name became something of value around here. I could talk about this building all day, so those will be the only ones I talk about here. But yeah, there's a lot of history here, and it's very interesting. The final thing I wanted to do is provide some clarifications as well as some updates about what the building is like today. So one of my friends raised this point where he asked me, what overtook the Penobscot building as the tallest building in the city in 1977? Because I didn't say what it was. The building that took over the top spot for tallest in the city was the Renaissance Center, and it's held onto that title since then. There were some plans for the Hudson site to take that title, but after delays and numerous changes during construction, the project was scaled down somewhat. It'll still be one of the tallest buildings in the city. It just won't be the tallest. What's the Penobscot building like today? Well, it really depends on who you ask. There have been numerous reports throughout 2020 and 2021 alleging that there's poor care and poor maintenance going on within the Penobscot building. In March of this year, an electrical fire inside the building's basement broke out, causing the elevators to stop and trapping 3 people inside. This is on top of numerous complaints from tenants, along with 170 blight violations filed by the city of Detroit against the owners of the Penobscot building. The owners claim they're addressing needs as best as they can, but there's no debate that there's some issues within the building that need to be fixed. It comes down to if people have faith in the owners to get that done, and many tenants and people around the city in general don't have faith in the owners to do that. It's just a shame because this is a truly great building. It's an important part of Detroit history, Michigan history, and much more. And to know that its future and present are both up in the air is sad. I just hope the building receives the care it needs. Why didn't I show more historic photos? This question came up when I showed the video to a few of my friends, and he got to the point in the video where I talk about the original Penobscot being on postcards, and I didn't show any postcards. Now, that wasn't because I didn't want to or because I was making that up, but because I didn't have rights to any of the photos or any postcards that had the Penobscot on it. So even with historic photos and videos, you still have to be careful about rights and licenses. There are many great resources for public domain photos, such as the Library of Congress, and I use those as much as I can. But many times, historic photos are in collections owned by private companies or by different organizations. There are several of these collections that you can view for yourself online, and I'll link to them. But there's a difference between looking at a photo online by yourself and using that same photo in a video, especially if it gets monetized. And some people might bring up, hey, what about fair use? Doesn't that let you do that? And with this kind of content, it's a gray area. Because while yes, I'm informing people, and it is to some degree educational, it isn't educational necessarily in the sense of what that really means. Usually in copyright, educational is associated with the institution, like you're doing this for like a school paper, or you're leading a lecture. So while many people may see this as educational, there's no clear answer on if this truly counts for that or not. And I personally like just erring on the side of caution and using photos that I have and photos that I take if necessary. But I will always use historic photos that I find that I know I can use safely. If you do want to look at some historic photos from Detroit, I'll leave a link to the Wayne State Library so you can find them for yourself, because they are amazing and there's tons of them. So go ahead, take a look, and you'll see some of the things that I'm talking about. Anyway, that does it for this video, and once again, just thank you for checking this out and for listening to me talk about some more stuff about the Penobscot building. I have a lot of plans for different buildings I want to cover. I just take a lot of time with my video editing and research, but I can promise you that there's more on the way. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch it when it comes out. And until then, have a great day.